Testing, testing. Legends Ultimate Indica.
Hi everybody, good morning. How'd we sleep last night in the fresh mountain air? Some whiffs of weed floating by. Nice. I don't know, I didn't sleep, but I'm glad you did. So we have Bubbleman up. I've been excited for this one. I had the pleasure of hanging out with Marcus sometimes and hearing some of these stories and thinking, man, people need to hear these stories. We gotta write a book or make a movie or give Bubbleman his own panel and do some story time. So I'm really excited to be able to give him that opportunity. I'm really excited for us to hear some of this exciting history and rich culture of this plant and the people that have been involved with it for a long time and take it seriously or passionate about it. So please give me a warm welcome for Marcus Richardson, Bubbleman.
Really, really love it. I'll be dabbing honey bananas today. Little honey boo-boo crossed with strawberry nana from DNA Genetics. It's so good. It is so, so good. Almost need a third hand here, but I'll figure it out. So yeah, when Che asked me to speak this year, I think we were actually at Antidote making some hash together from his Sarah's Secret. It was, that's another story. But he asked me, hey, you know, if you want to, what would you want to speak about? I don't ever plan my talks, ever. I've never planned a talk. Just kind of come and speak. And so when he asked me, you know, what do you want to speak about? I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just tell some cool stories about my history and about, you know, stories from the game, basically. Just kind of what we called it before it got all corporate and legal. It was the game. Anyway, I got turned on to cannabis at 14 years old. Very similar to the scene out of Half Baked with Dave Chappelle, when they're all young and they smoke their joint and they're all giggling. That's when he's in the supermarket store and he's like, Abba Zaba, you my only friend. He's hugging the big Abba Zaba bar. Very similar experience with me and my friends after we smoked our first joint. Things escalated pretty quickly for me after that first joint. It seemed like, I don't know how much time went by, but before you knew it, I was flipping quarters and then ounces and, you know, quarter pounds. And then I met this amazing man by the name of Ron Hickey. And Ron Hickey was really, you know, outside of my father, he was one of my first mentors, and he was definitely my first mentor in the game. Ron lives in the Kootenays, here in the Kootenays, in Proctor, actually. But he was originally a Winnipeg guy, and, you know, for anyone that knew or knows Ron, an absolute maniac, savage, awesome person. And so within a very short period of meeting Ron, he started, you know, cuffing me 10 packs, like 10 pounds of weed at a time. This guy was a real character. He did 11 years in Stony Mountain Penitentiary for being a habitual florist. If you can imagine, growing cannabis. They put him in prison with some of the most dangerous people in Canada. He's got his own incredible stories. He should be here telling his own stories, because even what he did while he was in prison and how many stabbings he kept from happening, using cannabis to bring people together instead of... Prison's a very divided place by race more than gangs. And so he really brought people together in that way. But I met him very young. I was probably 16 or 17 years old. I had some maybe 18 even. I had some plants that were sick, and we went to he had a hydroponic store in the city. This is a guy that did 6 years in prison. Now he's got a hydroponic store in the Bible Belt in Manitoba, and I go there and ask him, you know, oh, I'm growing these tomato plants, and you know, they're not doing too good. And I'm like, literally probably look like I'm 12 years old, and he's just like, look, kid, I know you're not growing tomato plants. Why don't we just talk about what you're growing? This is like in 1992 or 93. This is a very long time ago, very illegal. You can get in a lot of trouble. He just immediately has trust, starts telling me, takes me down to his basement, actually, and we start dabbing oil. He's got this crazy oil, and he's got hot knives, and now we're dabbing oil, and he's telling me all this crazy shit. And he really brought me under his wing, took me under his wing, and allowed me to to just be exposed to the world of cannabis in a way that I would have never been exposed. Ron, having the only hydroponic store in the city, he basically set up everyone with their grows. And then what he would do is he would go to each of those grows throughout the day and help make sure that they were all kind of being lined up. I'm going to hit this real quick. A moment of silence for the honey bananas. Oh my God. I wish I could share this with all of you. Maybe I will when we're done. There's not many of you. We could pull this off. Okay. So I'll tell a few stories about Ron. One of the funniest stories that I had with Ron was a real wild man, and there was just always the craziest shit happening. And so one day he tells me, I got 5 gallons of chloroform. I'm like, chloroform? Like the stuff you knock people out with? He's like, yeah, the solvent, chloroform. I'm like, ooh, isn't that like super illegal? Like, are you even allowed to have that? He's like, oh yeah, it's super, they watch it super carefully and all the bins have numbers, but I managed to get some and I poured it out and then I gave them back the empty. So he's got this chloroform and he says, let's make some oil out of chloroform. I hear you can make really good oil from chloroform. So we're in his house, we're soaking the weed in the chloroform, and we're doing the soak, and we cooled the chloroform. We froze, like made it very cold, and then we put the chloroform latent oil on like little plates with a little hot plate and a fan, and was blowing this chloroform oil out the back window of his house. About 20 minutes into this, I go outside. And I see this big squirrel, and it's like dead, like right by the window. I guess it got chloroformed to death. And so Ron's a very caring individual. I tell him about this. He comes over. He's basically crying. He's like, oh my God, I killed the squirrel. So we pick this thing up with a shovel, and we bring it into his house. And within 5 or 10 minutes, I was like, I think I saw it move. I think it moved, Ron. I think it moved. And it's sort of laying there with its hands up, and its little pinky is doing this, and then it's doing this. And we're watching it fairly stoned, and suddenly it comes to life like 100% and starts tearing around his house. So now we're high on chloroform oil. We're making chloroform oil. We have 5 gallons of chloroform, which I'm sure at the time probably would have gotten us like 5 years in prison just to have that 5 gallons of chloroform. And we ended up, for about 40 minutes chasing this squirrel down. It did some pretty good damage to his house, tore up his couch, which, was just a standard day. I'll never forget his wife, Gail, coming home and being like, Ron, what happened? Oh, we were making chloroform oil and we thought we killed the squirrel, and then the squirrel tore around the house and ripped up the couch and the wallpaper. And she was just like, okay. Like, it was just the most normal thing to her, whereas most people might think that was a pretty insane moment in time. So that's what it was like being with Ron every single day that you were with him. So a true mentor that really taught me that anything is possible. He was an incredible grower, still is a great grower, really paid attention to, the flush and the giving plants love, the intention, before I was exposed to it from, West Coast people. Dragonfly Earth Medicine is a perfect example of that vibration, of that like loving intention. Winnipeg wasn't like that. We didn't have a lot of that. But Ron, whether he knew it or not, he had that. Even though he projected himself to the world to be very different than that, that's what he was really about. And so he taught that to me about cannabis. And I'm very type A OCD, much like Ron was as well. So we really clicked in that sense. I mean, he's still one of my best friends to this day. Love him dearly, wonderful man. And really, when people ask me about my journey, like, how did you become Bubbleman? It started really with Ron. Like, Ron was if I didn't meet Ron, I don't know if I would have ended up on the same pathway that I did end up on with here in the cannabis world. So I'll just go through a quick little history of these moments with Ron, just kept escalating, and he was facilitating all of this exposure and all of this experience for me to tap into, from being at all these different people's grows, from seeing all these different personalities and seeing all the different things in those people that weren't at the top of their game projected and reflecting back to them in their plants through mites, through aphids, through powdery mildew, through all of these different sicknesses that the plants would have. And you start correlating them to these very specific people because, it was a very unique experience to be able to go into 30 or 40 or 50 grows in a city in the 90s where it was so highly illegal that those people weren't even telling their brother or their best friend where their grow was, and I was just getting brought to all of them from Ron. Ron gave me immediate street cred with people that were like, they didn't know who I was, I looked like I was 12, and it probably made them very, very nervous growing cannabis in a city where if you get caught, you go to Stony Mountain Penitentiary, which is kind of like the most extreme. We got to be blessed for where we're at right now. And I know a lot of people complain about the corporations and the corporatization of cannabis and the over-regulations and all of this. But it beats being put in a cage for 10 years at a time, and it definitely beats being pulled over at gunpoint on the side of the road and taken and put in a cage. Those things should have never happened with cannabis. So we do have to celebrate the fact that we've gotten to a point now where we can all enjoy cannabis together at a beautiful festival like this and just give thanks, be grateful. Ron sort of kept me going down that pathway of like watching all these people. I guess I didn't feel the urge to grow as much of my own weed now that I was spending, 12, 15 hours at a time. Ron would come get me at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and he'd drop me off at like 10 or 11 the next morning. We'd just be going to grows all throughout the night, and he'd be helping them figure out what was wrong with those grows. Through that, I ended up, obviously, one of the best things Ron did was he gave me cannabis of such a high quality that suddenly people were like, that guy has good cannabis. That guy over there, that guy Mark, he's got good cannabis. And so that's one of the bonuses, back then, Ron was such an anomaly. Very few people grew cannabis on the level that he grew it. And so having that also really bolstered my ability to get into every group. From high school, what clique were you in? Oh, I don't know. I wasn't in a clique. I just sold weed to all of them. Every clique, whichever they were, there's always weed smokers in each of them, and those are the ones that I found. I ended up eventually meeting a pretty cool group of guys, Martin Moravchik, Alex Schwayeski, John Gio, Neil Chippendale would be in there as well. In the early days in Manitoba, and we got it in our heads as we were smoking cannabis that we were going to try and get hemp growing in our province. We sort of started, this was like 93, and we started doing research and finding out that, there are these amendments in the drug and peace law that was done back in like 67, that if the THC is below 0.3%, 0.3 or below, the classification of marijuana would change to hemp, and that hemp would fall under a different set of regulations that were not as stringent. So most of our supporters laughed at us and told us we would get hemp growing in the ground when hell freezes over. But for those of you that have ever been to Winnipeg, know that A, it is hell, and B, that it absolutely does freeze over. Every winter. Swear to God. Oh, thank you. She hears my dry mouth. My beautiful wife of 35 years. Yes, absolutely. The queen. So yeah, we got into this whole hemp activism thing. We kind of realized, listen, Winnipeg is not the place in 93 to be pushing the THC agenda or the medical or the recreational, all of ones that we loved and believed in. But we thought we better come at this one from a far angle. And so we applied for hemp. We figured out a bunch of different things. Long story short, we basically got a license, an experimental license to grow hemp in 1995. We applied in 94. We didn't get it that year. There was only 2 Canadians that got it that year, Joe Strobel and Jeff Kime. They were a tobacco farmer and a lawyer from Ontario. But we ended up getting this license. And I'll never forget it because we actually brought Ron to the field when it was about 5 feet tall. And we were in my Volkswagen van, and I drove him right through the middle of the field. He'd only been out of prison for a while, but it brought tears to his eyes. He couldn't believe that he was like, this looks like weed. I'm like, yeah, it is. We sort of told a fib. We sort of told them that hemp was a distant cousin of cannabis. And because of that THC percentage, they accepted that for whatever reason. A lot of things when it comes to regulation is not about trying to make them see the light, but it is to speak the specific language that unlocks the door that allows it to happen. And if you don't do that, you just bang your head against the wall. So we got this hemp license. We grew this hemp. I ended up moving away to British Columbia soon after, 96. My wife and I, we moved west. But my partners kept at it, and they built a substantial thing with the hemp industry in Manitoba. They had a company called Manitoba Harvest, Fresh Hemp Foods, which is, the oil and the seed that is available in all the supermarkets that many of you have probably purchased. Like, that was a bunch of just sort of stoned young teenager guys sitting around dreaming a dream that seemed impossible even to the people who would share that dream with us. And we made it happen. So it was pretty incredible. I moved out west and linked up with the one friend that I had out west. I only really knew one person, and her name was Hillary Black. And so she worked at Hemp BC for Mark Emery back in the day. And she was just really cool whenever we showed up. Some of the other people that worked there we just felt, because we were, Winnipeg guys, just these prairie guys rolling in. We probably had strong prairie accents and just stuck out in a way that we didn't realize we were sticking out. So we got a lot of the I'm too cool for school energy given back at us when we would go to Hemp BC, because we drive 25 hours to go to like this shop, and if no one cared, it kind of felt personal. But Hillary cared, and she was always like, "Yo, it's the Winnipeg hemp guys. What's up?" And we'd always have the haze. She's a big fan of the haze. Ron, of course, hooked me up with the haze. That's another story. And so Hillary ended up, when I moved out to BC, she was kind of like in love with this guy, Todd McCormick, and he was in Los Angeles growing this huge mansion, a big crop, which was insane because he was neighbors with Ronald Reagan. And it's worse. They got busted. And so thank God Hillary wasn't there. But Todd did 5 years in Terminal Island in California. And he's had cancer multiple times, and his spine is fused together. So he's like, not that anyone deserves to be in prison, but it's harder to be in prison when you have like disabilities and you're somewhat fucked up. Pardon my French. Renee Bourget was also seen watering a plant at that grow, and they wanted to extradite her. She was up here in Canada. They wanted to put her in prison for a mandatory minimum of 10 years because they had one photo of her watering one single cannabis plant out on the deck at Todd's house. So Hillary was trying to figure out, should I go live with Todd in California, or should I stay here in BC? And maybe, she's like, I have this idea inspired by Valerie Corral and Dennis Perron and all the people that were doing medical cannabis in California in the early to mid 90s. And Hillary was like inspired by all of that. She got exposed to it through Grateful Dead tour. And basically was like, I want to start like a dispensary, but not a dispensary. And she'd be over at our house, and I remember her writing on a piece of paper, like, these are the words I don't like: medical, marijuana. She went through this whole list, and then she's like, these are the words I do like: cannabis, compassion. And it became the BC Compassion Club. Boom, I was one of the first growers for the BC Compassion Club. And then through, my experience of selling cannabis at the time, because I was pretty decent at it, I was able to help the club through that experience. I thought, you know what I can do is, when I'm out buying all this cannabis, I can kind of pull like small lots of the nicest and just get it to the club, you know, even at a loss. Because it was like, the Cannabis Compassion Club started as the most vulnerable people from our society. So there are the mentally ill, there are the homeless, there are the drug addicted, and there are the terminally ill. And most of the time, the original members of the BC Compassion Club checked all 4 boxes. So these are extremely vulnerable people. No one in their right mind was going to the Compassion Club and being like, holy shit, I'm gonna monetize this, dude. I'm gonna make so much money selling weed to these people. It's not, and so, you know, Hillary also for many years sort of suffered the life of a pauper because it was always about helping these sort of, you know, people that needed the most help. But that was an incredible thing to be a part of. I was one of the first medical cannabis court cases for the BC Compassion Club. I was coming home with a little bit of flour, really a little bit compared to the day, but 16 pounds or something. And I went through a roadblock. I think we might have also been on mushrooms, and it could have been 2 a.m., but that's neither here nor there. We went through this roadblock, and to me it seemed very set up, and he had this sort of, you know, clipboard, and he was letting cars through without even talking to them. And then when I came up, he was like, he just knew, like I knew someone had told. And so Hillary was like, I'll be testifying for you. You know, John Conroy was my lawyer, which was a completely incredible experience. Towards the end, or towards the middle, John was being asked by the lawyer and the prosecutor and the judge, what's a good day for the next court case? And his learned friend says, November 22nd, such and such a year, 98, I guess it was. And John's like, no, Your Honor, that won't be good for me. Leans back into my ear and says, because I'll be going to the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam with my client. We were going to Amsterdam together in November of that year, which we did, and it was an awesome trip. Stayed at the Hotel Torin next to the Anne Frank house. But so I ended up kind of going through that whole court case. The club was amazing. All the people at the club, lots of patients that I had known from day one were like coming. I would send like a school bus or a bus to go pick up any people that wanted to come and show support. And then I would also like donate flour, just be like, you know, here's an eighth or a quarter, like just every time they rolled up, I'd give them some flour because I knew how important it was, which we did also through all the holidays and whatnot. But ended up getting no fine, no time. The judge ordered my money be given back. And the most intense part of it was the prosecuting attorney, who was a total prosecutor, cowboy boots, like he was just like the Texan prosecutor. And John and him had known each other for 25 years at this point in time. And at one point, you know, this prosecutor comes up to John and tells him, look, so-and-so, our good buddy, is in the hospital and is dying of cancer. And after listening to this whole case, which was all about the medical use of cannabis and why it should be accessible, which is why when medical cannabis was allowed, and they didn't bust them all, that the judge said in my case, if we're going to allow medical cannabis, then we can't expect it to fall from the sky like manna. It has to come from somewhere. And this is what opened up transportation of medical cannabis in Canada, this court case. So yeah, no fine, no time. Judge ordered my money be given back. I did catch a felony for it, which I got scrubbed years later. But I never looked at it as a negative. I thought, you know what? This was incredible work that Hillary did. I felt blessed to just be allowed to be a part of that work that she was doing. And once I got busted, I couldn't really sell weed anymore, even though I probably could have. But to me, the way I knew the game, it was like, nah, I can't really do this anymore. It's like maybe I'm a heat scorer. Maybe they're watching me. I don't know, right? In the end, they weren't, and I could have probably kept doing it. But instead, I had to come to a crossroads. I was really good at something and able to make money doing it, but now I couldn't do it at all, cold turkey, and I had to figure out another way to maintain paying for the lifestyle that I had acquired, which was very different from the one I grew up in Winnipeg. So this was like, okay, I got to get out there and I got to figure this out. And so I had heard about this bag system, a two bag water hash system from Amsterdam. I'd seen it actually. And I thought, wow, you know what? I could sell that. I could sell that system. And so I went to Amsterdam and I met with the woman who I thought at the time who had created this bag system. In fact, she was just selling the bag system. I would learn the true history later through an insane 5-year-long patent lawsuit. But basically, I went to Amsterdam, tried to get into selling these bags for her, but kind of rubbed her the wrong way that day. I don't know if you know a lot of Dutch people, especially ones that own coffee shops, but they deal with a lot of Americans. And sometimes at the end of the week, they've dealt with too many, and it's like they're intense. And so she kind of like lashed out on me. I was there to buy like 500 to 1,000 of these 2-bag kits. And I came home super bummed because I really thought this is what we can invest the little bit of money that we have left and start a whole company with. And I came home devastated. And my wife was like, why don't we just make our own? And I was like, what do you mean, make our own? She's like, yeah, we could just sew them and you could just sell them. And so that was the birth of Fresh Headies and Bubble Bags. And that's really where I chose the silly moniker Bubbleman to promote this concept. And I don't know, maybe there's people here that don't know what bubble bags are. That scares me if you don't, but I'll tell you, it's just a simple bag system with screen bottoms that allow you to use water and ice to isolate the resin glands from the plant to create a very, very concentrated, pure version of hashish. And we had great luck with that company and with the whole process, going online and selling it, creating an online business in like 99, 2000, like right when that sort of scene started. It was like digital cameras were just coming out, online services to take credit cards. Everything was sort of colliding simultaneously for a lot of different people to pivot and switch into, web-based business. And we created this company, and wow, Bubble Bags really took off. It was mind blowing how much it took off, and how it just changed everything. Like suddenly, and I'll tell you, the whole reason I wanted to do that was because I saw John Conroy take a paper bag full of money that if I had gotten pulled over with it like 5 minutes earlier, they would have been like, this is proceeds of crime. He takes that paper bag, he goes to the bank and just gives it to them because he's a respective lawyer, and they just cash that money into his bank, and I'm like, holy shit. So instead of selling weed to get money, I could sell something that people use with weed to get money, but I'm not involved in the weed part of it. And that was another part of Bubble Bags. I thought, if I can get money, because here's the thing, even during a recession, people who sell weed are still making money. People who have weed money are like, yeah, I'll buy some Bubble Bags for $300. Like, fuck, I want to make some hash. Yeah, I'll buy a tumbler. I'll buy like people who are deep into cannabis have all the toys, have all the tools, if you will. And so I figured, well, if I can create a tool, and it's not that we created it, but we definitely pioneered and bettered it. 2 bags weren't enough. We have an 8-bag system now. And the way it came about was just, it was just all of that timing colliding simultaneously, me getting busted. And it really led me to believe, too, that when you're manifesting your future, they always say, oh, it'll come in ways you least expect it. It's like so many people spend enormous amounts of time and energy manifesting a future that they allow to pass them by because they're so stuck on recognizing what that manifestation should look like. They think it's an opportunity, but it almost always represents itself as an obstacle at first. And so for me, to be able to go through a roadblock years later and see Constable John Lowe, the guy that busted me with the Compassion Club weed, and to thank him and be like, dude, I am not upset with you in any way. Literally, like, you helped change and pivot my life. I think I might have given him one jab. I think I might have said, there are literally tons of hashish being made all around the world thanks to you. Yeah, tons. So I don't know how much more time I have left. That kind of leads me... It's 11:55. Is anyone organizing this at all, or should I just talk for a little bit longer? Yeah. All right, we'll keep talking. I'll keep going for a bit. So yeah, and bubble bags, just by 2002, from 99 to 2002, it was a hustle. But by 2003, it was substantial. It was like money coming in, bags going out, and more importantly, and I'll tell you another time that it was pivotal for me, that I really knew that this was going to be serious, was one of my first customers was a woman from Indiana. And I mean, this is 99. Do you know how illegal cannabis is in Indiana in 1999? Like, it is go to prison time, let me tell you. So she's like this, like, middle America church woman, like, just very straight and very just like, she's like, I saw your ad. I'm not sure that if I understand it correctly, but basically what your tool can do is make a purified medicine with marijuana, she said. And so I said, yes, basically. And so she bought a small set of bags. Her father was very sick. He was 86 years old. And he had wasting syndrome. So he weighed a very, 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 like 87 pounds or something. Kind of what you weigh right before you pass away. And so she had heard that cannabis, and I think she even saw it on a movie or something, like the Munchies. And kind of like, why would they make that joke? Well, because when you smoke cannabis, it gives you the Munchies, right? This is the generalization. It doesn't give me the Munchies, but everyone's different. So... Don't let me lose where my train of thought was going. Indiana woman. Yes, thank you. Harvard. Indiana woman. So she buys the bags. She sends me this crazy letter. Like, this is how long ago this was, right? She sent me a letter, and a handwritten letter, and basically told me this whole story. She said, look, I was like out on the streets buying like an ounce of marijuana. I was so terrified. So she gets this weed, she goes home, she bought her bubble bags in 99. She's like more advanced than most hardcore cannabis users in the country, and she has no relationship with it whatsoever. She has the love of her father and the worry of losing him. And so she makes him the bubble. I don't know if she dried it properly or whatnot, but she put it in his corn cob pipe. This is how old this motherfucker was. He had a corn cob pipe. And he puffed this bubble, and then she's like, and he ate a whole McCain's chocolate cake that night, which is hilarious, but it's also what you did. It's also like, oh, right? It's both of those things, and I think I reacted both of those ways when I read the letter. I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. This is like, I just thought it would be cool to let people smoke great hash, but there's implications that go deeper into this, right? Which is that whole Compassion Club relationship of, because cannabis has sort of two sides. There's this recreational, which I really call recreational, preventative. It's the preventative medicine. And then there's the medicinal, which is more serious. Usually once people are like really focused on cannabis as a medicine, they're fairly sick. You know, and that's what I hope to see change in the future, where we don't have to wait till we have stage 3 colon cancer to decide to take cannabinoids. There's sort of this way that you can use it as a preventative. And I mean, in my opinion, you know, I was watching TV the other night because my wife and I are staying at a hotel, and we saw these pharmaceutical commercials with like the most insane side effects. And I thought, holy shit, imagine the only side effect cannabis has is the feeling of euphoria, getting high. Like, that is the greatest medicine ever. So yeah, it's been great to me throughout these last 30 years of my life. It's been really cool to be allowed to be in a position where we were this catalyst for hash making around the world. And It's something that I've been passionate about for a very long time. I do a party called Legends of Hash. I used to do it in Amsterdam for many, many years, and I've done it in Barcelona, and I've done it in Vancouver, and even did one in Jamaica. But now we do them in Los Angeles, and they're really a bridge to the old history of hashish, and paying homage to how that came about, and understanding these different places that people went to use and smoke hashish, and how different cultures grow and collect and smoke hashish, and sort of paying homage to that, but at the same time bringing in the new and showing this new methodology of like what we can do when we increase that science of extraction and isolation to get these things that really didn't exist 50 to 60 years ago that now do today. So that's kind of one of my ways to pay back annually. Have a really great party, 350 people. Hashish is the focus for the entire party, and there's a little competition in there as well that people do and sort of always enjoy that. It's a good time. Hopefully one day we'll be able to bring it back to British Columbia. I guess in the meantime, I don't know if I have anything else to say. I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Che.
Testing.
Was that girl of mine? If I had a little